For generations, households have produced their own soap from the natural world and from things around them. We've been doing that for decades, and it produces absolutely wonderful soap. If you watch today's video, you'll be able to do it too. Hello, welcome to English Country Life. Welcome to the workshop and welcome to Simple Homemade Soap. We've been making soap for decades now and it's a firm part of our lifestyle. Why? Well, we love the soap we make. We think it's fabulous smelling, it can be tuned to exactly what we want, it's long lasting and it's ethical. What do I mean by ethical? Well, here's some bars of typical household soap, Imperial leather. Let's read the ingredients. Main ingredient, sodium palmate. Then sodium palm kernelate. Then aqua. So the three main ingredients of Imperial leather are palm oil and water. If you think that doesn't happen with the ethical top brands, this comes from the Body Shop. Main ingredient, sodium palmate. Now they'll tell you that they use sustainable palm oil. But what that means is still grown on land that usually used to be rainforest. It's sustainable because apparently they aren't clearing new forests for that particular plantation. Of course, it's not actually traceable. You can't prove what came from where a lot of the time, although people are working towards that and that's to be commended. But my point is, we don't need to use palm oil at all. There is no requirement to use palm oil. In fact, for centuries we didn't in this country. We still made absolutely fabulous soap. Now, you can get, to be fair, palm oil free soap. Lush sell it, for example. It's £5 for 100 grams, 50 quid a kilo for soap. We make this wonderful lavender scented soap. It's palm oil free, it lasts well, it's luxurious feeling, and it costs a few pounds a kilo. Let me show you how we make it. Before we get started, I want to talk about two things. One, what soap is, and secondly, some safety precautions that we need to take, and this quite seriously, we have to be safe making soap because we're using some very dangerous chemicals. What soap is? Well, soap actually is created at a molecular level. So when we are doing some workshop chemistry today, I am not mixing ingredients, we're actually altering those ingredients at a molecular level. And soap is created by introducing a strong alkali into a fat or oil. You can make soap from any fats or oils. You can use lard, which we're going to use today. And we made a video on making your own lard, and I'll link to it somewhere up above. You can use beef dripping, but you can use vegetable materials. You can use olive oil. It makes a wonderfully soft and gentle soap. A little bit soft, so I generally add a little bit of beeswax to an olive oil soap mix just to make it a little bit tougher, otherwise it goes a bit soft and squishy. But you can use almond oil, you can use corn oil, you can use almost anything that is a fat or oil, be it animal or vegetable based. If the idea of washing with lard bothers you, don't let it, because you won't be. It is altered at a chemical level. Yeah, I mean, salt is sodium chloride. You wouldn't put chlorine, which is a poisonous gas, or sodium, which burns in the presence of air, on your food, but salt, as sodium chloride, has been changed at molecular level. Soap made from a dangerous caustic product and a fat is neither of those things. It is simply soap because it's been altered at a molecular level. Right, on to the safety. We're going to use a fat. We're going to use a caustic product called caustic soda. Caustic soda works brilliantly in soap making, but it is a powerful alkali, which is the opposite of an acid. Being the opposite doesn't mean it's less dangerous. Because it will chemically alter fats and animal products, it will also chemically alter you if it comes in contact with you. So when soap making, Always wear heavy rubber gloves. Domestic rubber gloves are fine, you know, the sort of thing you'd get for washing up, etc. And face protection. Many soap makers use goggles, and that's fine, they protect your eyes. I prefer to use one of these. This is a face mask, full face mask. They are very cheap, about £10 on Amazon. They go over your brow in a band which is adjustable, and they fully protect all of your face. When not in use, you can just flick it up out of the way. They are very good, and they protect all your exposed skin if used with long sleeves and rubber gloves. So this isn't something I would do with young children, soap making. You know, a teenager under your supervision, absolutely fine. But you do have to be sensible. You do have to take just some sensible precautions. We're ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is carefully weigh out our ingredients, because if we put too much fat into the recipe, what we're going to end up with is a very greasy soap. If we put too much caustic soda into the recipe, we're going to end up with a soap that will literally burn your skin. If we put too much water in, the soap will be sloppy and will not set. So we have to get the proportions exactly right. So what we need for this recipe is 16 ounces of lard, 5 ounces of water, and I'm going to use mineral water because we've got very chalky hard water around here, and 2 ounces of caustic soda. So I'm going to weigh this out, and all soap recipes are done by weight, never by volumes. You even weigh the water. We can do it in grams. If we prefer to do it in grams, then it's 455 grams of lard, 57 grams of caustic soda, and 142 grams of spring water. So here is our homemade lard. We want the equivalent of 16 ounces or 454 grams. Now I cast these into rough blocks, and it looks like I'm getting about 130 grams a block. That's 264, and I want 458. So I'm going to use most of 4 of these blocks. Don't be frightened to go and buy your lard. I know we make our lard, but if you want to go to your local butcher, buy yourself a pack of lard or a couple of packs of lard, that will work equally well in this recipe. We've measured out our ingredients by weight. We've now got to combine them in the right way, in the correct order, at the right temperature, and that will create soap. So what we do is we melt the lard in the saucepan, get it to about 130 Fahrenheit, 54 centigrade. At the same time, we mix our caustic soda into our water. You always add caustic soda to water, never the other way around. The reason for that is when you mix those two things, they give off a huge amount of heat. It's called an exothermic reaction. Just means gives off heat. If you add water to caustic, there's a small amount of water initially hits the caustic, and that can, because there's nothing to absorb the heat, that can almost boil and give off fumes, and it's really nasty. If you add small amounts of caustic into the water, there's a big volume of water to absorb the heat, and the reaction is a little bit less violent that way. But either way, always, face mask, gloves, use some protection, particularly when working with the caustic soda with this. When we've got both lots, the fat and the caustic soda solution, to 130 Fahrenheit, 54 centigrade, we combine the two together and we stir. And the stirring promotes what's called saponification. That is the chemical reaction that creates the soap. So that's a little bit of heat. I really quite like these small butane stoves. They're very effective for workshop use. And we're just going to gradually render that fat down into its liquid state. As the fat melts, it's helpful to have one of these large thermometers, and we can add it to the fat and we can see what temperature that fat is sitting at. So what you can already see is that fat is above the 54 centigrade at which we want to combine the fat with the solution of caustic soda. So what I'm going to do is really reduce the heat. Now the reality is, of course, that the big lumps of lard that remain are actually cooler than the liquid fat that's already melted. But what I'm finding there is we need to melt this gently because we want to keep it relatively cool just above its melting point. As that last piece of lard melts, just let me give you a little hint on the saucepans. Try to stick to stainless steel. You can use enamel if you want, but you want something that doesn't react. You're going to be introducing caustic soda into this pan, so you don't want something that's highly reactive. So stay away from things like copper pans. Ideally, I find stainless steel the best. I'm going to put this thermometer back in a second. I've just had it in the mineral water that we've weighed. It's very hard to get it to read accurately on the camera, but if you can see carefully, it's reading about 12 degrees centigrade, which is pretty much the air temperature today. What I'm going to do now, checking that I've got my visor down, putting my rubber gloves on, so I'm going to add the caustic soda to the pre-weighed water. So here's our caustic soda. And now you notice I'm not putting it all in one go. I'm going to stir that into the water, and I'm not leaning over because it gives off all sorts of nasty fumes. I'd like you to look carefully at the top of this beaker. Can you see the steam rising off? I've put no heat on that beaker and it's currently sat at just under 80 centigrade. And that heat is caused by the so-called exothermic, i.e. gives off heat, reaction between the caustic soda and the water. So what I'm doing now is sitting and juggling these two items and trying to get them to the same temperature. What I generally do is let the lard cool over much first, because it's hard to adjust the temperature on the caustic soda solution. But I can easily put the heat back on if the lard's cooled a little bit too much and get that back up to 54 centigrade. So what I try and do is work the lard to the caustic solution and not the other way around. The melted lard and caustic solution are both around 54 centigrade, 130 Fahrenheit now. So what I'm going to do, very carefully, is mix them together. Can you see the colour change there? Look at that. That is soap forming in the lard. To make it work well, we need to stir that together. And a wooden spoon is probably as good as anything, although to be honest, clean piece of bamboo, stick, etc. would work absolutely fine as well. What we now need to do is stir this until it becomes so thick that a line drawn with the drips off the back of the spoon stays for a bit on the surface, so that it's not a liquid, it's becoming more of almost like a gel. That level is called achieving trace. You need to keep stirring your soap solution continuously. The stirring isn't just mixing, it's actually promoting the saponification process, the process of the fats and alkalis turning into soap is accelerated by the stirring. And you have to stir, it can take up to 30 minutes, so don't be impatient. Just keep stirring until that line appears across the surface when you dribble off the back of the spoon or draw the spoon across the surface. Keep stirring. When we achieve trace, we need to pour our soap into a mould. And you can use anything for a mould. That's what I used to use for a long time. A Tupperware box, and I pour the whole mix in there, let it set up overnight, knock it out and slice it into bars with a sharp knife. Worked brilliantly. These days, I use something like this. It's a silicone mould. It's really soft. And you can just turn the soap out easily. I still grease it, just to make sure that the soap turns out neatly, but they're so convenient to cast nice family bar pieces of soap. So much so that secondhand I bought a bunch of these that cast 4 bars at a time. Often, coming up to Christmas, I make soap, and soap is often a welcome gift, I find, particularly handmade soap. So I do own some quite fancy moulds that cast flower shapes, etc., as pretty little guest soaps. And they're always welcome, I find. It's surprising the number of neighbours, etc., that really think, oh, they're beautiful. Can you make me some for my mum? Can you make me some olive oil soap for my friend who's got eczema? And, you know, if you're going to make a lovely product, it's worth making it look attractive as well. So these are great too. But if you're just starting out, my buddy makes wonderful soap in a wooden mould that he made out of 5 bits of wood, little offcuts of wood. He lines it with cling film, puts a little bit of oil on that cling film, casts his soap in that. It looks really professional. You don't have to spend money on moulds. A common question is, well, what shall I grease and lubricate those moulds with? Well, this is the leftover bit of lard after we weighed out the exact amount, and that's absolutely fine to grease the mould with. If I didn't have that, a bit of olive oil on a piece of kitchen towel, anything like that, just something that leaves an oily residue, not too much, just on the surface of the mould to ensure the soap turns out nicely. This is something they don't show you in many of the soap making books, but if you want to hurry trace along, remember I said stirring promotes the reaction? Well, make sure your visor's down before you do this, but you get an old stick blender. Can you see the clouds of soap coming out when I do that? A very quick stir using a stick blender will save 25 of the 30 minutes of stirring. Can you see how thick this has become, and that folds that I'm leaving have started to sort of sit on the surface for a bit? That's called achieving trace. Don't wait too long. When it's as thick as tomato soup, it's thick enough. Now, at this stage and not before, if you want to, you can add some pure essential oil to scent your soap. About a tablespoon is the right amount. I'm adding lemon because I love a citrus soap, and if I make citrusy soaps, Fiona is always my best friend. She really loves them. And the other thing that I'm going to add to this soap is some ground oatmeal. It's steel cut oatmeal, and I've actually put it through a coffee grinder a little bit, just to make it slightly finer. And this makes like a sort of citrus oatmeal scrub bar, which for your morning wake up in the shower, it's not rough, it's not painful, it just gives a little bit more sort of abrasiveness to the soap that gives you that lovely tingly feeling when you give yourself a good hard wash. You don't have to add it. Now, the reason that we're adding this stuff at trace is because if you add the essential oil before trace, because it's an oil, the caustic soda will react to it and actually take away the essential oil and turn it into soap. Given that we've got trace, most of the reaction has occurred now. So what we're doing now by adding the scent later is adding it at a time where it will not be consumed by the caustic soda. Once you've achieved trace and you've added any essential oils and other materials you wish, it's time to move quite quickly. So pour your soap into your moulds, just like that. What I've got here is an old piece of plywood covered in a fleece blanket, and I've put my moulds on top of that because they need to be wrapped and protected for 24 hours while the soap sets. So what I can now do is just carefully put another board on top, then we can wrap the blanket over that, keep everything warm, leave it for 24 hours to set. I'm going to leave that batch of soap now for 24 hours to set fully in the moulds. Now, it hasn't finished processing then. So when I turn it out, still going to use my rubber gloves, and then I will rewrap it and leave it for 28 days for that process to complete of the chemical reaction between the caustic soda and the fat coming together to combine, react and form soap. So it needs 28 days because we're using what's called the cold processing method. There are other methods that you can hot process soap in things like a slow cooker. It's a finished product more quickly, but it needs more equipment. So we're showing the simple, straightforward way today of producing soap, in my opinion. If you're going to try this and you want to make your own recipes, this is my soap making Bible. It's called The Handmade Soap Book by Melinda Cross. And in it, there are charts that give you the ratios of the amount of caustic soda that goes with every different type of fat and oil. So if you want to use rice bran oil or corn oil or what have you, you can look it up in that book and you'll get the ratios spot on so that your soap is neither slimy with too much oil nor dangerous with too much caustic soda. You can get the charts online as well. They're called Saponification Charts. Get them from a quality source is my one recommendation. You don't want to get this wrong. While we're on the subject of talking about soap, let me say a few words on antibacterial soap. Last year, at the time I make this video, the FDA, the American Food and Drugs Authority, came out and said there is no evidence that antibacterial soap is any more effective at removing bacteria from hands than traditional bar soap. They also had put a call out for evidence that the use of the materials that make it so-called antibacterial is safe in the long term. And I believe, from my reading, that they were not satisfied that they'd had sufficient evidence to prove that those ingredients were safe for long-term use. Do your own research on that. I'm not an expert, I'm not a scientist, and I haven't been privy, but I have read the summary FDA judgment, which basically said no evidence antibacterial soap is any more effective than normal bar soap. And that certainly is my take on it. Hot water, a bar of soap, a nail brush where required will get your hands as clean as they need to be. So don't feel that you need to go out and sort of buy these expensive pump soaps. A bar of homemade soap will get your hands just as clean. Last point is, you don't have to make what I would consider to be a small batch of soap like we just did. That was the pan that we used to make that batch of soap. I'm going to do another batch in a minute in a pan that size because it doesn't take much longer to make 12 bars of soap than it does to make 4. If you've got all the kit together, you've got all your caustic soda, you've got your scales out, you've got your spoons, you've got everything else, generally, once you're comfortable with the process, I find it's just as easy to make 6 months worth of soap. And that's what I'm going to do in a minute. Well, the soap's set hard overnight in the moulds, but it's not yet finished its process. So I'm still wearing rubber gloves. Don't touch it with naked skin for 28 days. Next job is to turn the soap out of the moulds, wrap each bar in a piece of plastic to keep the air off it, and then wrap the whole lot up in an old blanket or an old towel, something to keep it lovely and warm because heat helps the process along. And then we leave it to cure for 28 days. Do take a note that the moulds now, whilst empty, still have residue of the soap making process on them. So I'll wash those up in hot water with a squeeze of washing up liquid, but still wearing rubber gloves. Look at that. That's one of the fancy soap moulds that we use. That's a chrysanthemum shape. I like the plain bars for my own use, but if I'm going to give the stuff away, then I very much do like to make it look as attractive as possible. Well, that was basic soap making. 3 basic ingredients: lard, we've shown you how to render lard, water, and caustic soda. And if you want, in another video, I'll show you how to make your own alkali. It's actually really simple. And once you can render your own fat, make your own alkali, you'll have soap at your fingertips anytime you want it, whatever situation you find yourself in economically. We can also show you lots of other techniques like this. I can show you how to make shampoo. I can show you how to make dish soap. I can show you how to make laundry soap. If any of those types of things are of interest, please let us know in the comments down below. And while you're there, if you've enjoyed today's, can you spare us 5 seconds for a thumbs up? But this is a new departure. We haven't done soap making and the like before. So if you're enjoying it, please tell us, and tell us what you'd like to see next time. If you do want to see more videos, while you're down there, hit the subscribe button, the bell next to it, and you'll hear every time we upload a new video. But whatever you do, come back and see us soon. Take care.